If you want to create this fullness of creative genius and you want it to flow through you, it's not going to flow through someone who feels that they're less than. It flows through someone who loves themselves, who knows that they are an expression of the divine. That was a good song selection. That's the name of my lesson right there. Let it be. Good one. Well, it's a great song, but we always don't live that way. We try to make it be. Let's make it be. Let's make it happen. Let's do it this, instead of let it be. We think, oh, that's not aggressive enough. That's not aggressive enough. But what we're learning in this series, and this is the last, not class, but the last lesson in this series from The Creative Life by Eric Butterworth, the 7 Keys to Your Inner Genius. And remember, this is based on the book of Genesis in the Bible, and he uses the 7 steps of creation to give us an outline just to show us how we can release our own creative genius. That's what it's about. And so we've been learning about that. So on day 1, we learned, I already have a review for you all. Is that good when I do the reviews? Instead of launching right into that? You're like, oh, I don't even remember. Well, good. So the first week was in the beginning God created. And I've been telling you that in Hebrew it's Reshen Elohim, which simply means God is. God is. And on the first day, he said, let there be light. And so there was light. And this light is really for us to know that God is the source. God is the foundation from which everything springs. And so the light is to encourage us to more light in us, is to pray from that understanding, to act from that understanding, to act from that truth, and to pray for more light, knowing that God is. That God is. The second day of creation, the waters separated, the dome of the sky separated the waters above from the waters below, and this is representative of this idea of faith. But it's not this faith or belief in something just namby-pamby kind of thing. This is deciding that, you know what, everything out here, everything out in the outer, it's already done and created, by the way. It's done out here. Where we got our inspiration and how we vibrate with the frequency of possibility is having this kind of vertical sense, this God sense. So knowing that God is, and then vibrate with possibility. Everything out here is already created. We don't have to take our clues and cues from out here. The idea is to vibrate with knowing that there's a possibility, because then what happens on day 3? The dry land appears. The dry land appears. This idea can come into our consciousness. And not an idea that's totally complete. Like, okay, these are the steps in getting there. It's the vibration, it's the sense of the idea, it's the energy of the idea. And it's encouraging us to see from the energy of the idea. Just like we have been doing with our new space. It's like, I don't know exactly what it looks like or where it's going to be or exactly how much it's going to cost or what the lease is going to look like. I have to see from the energy of it. That's how our Renee found it. And then poof, it was gone because it was hers to see. Maybe, that's my story. We see from the energy of the idea. That's what it's about. On the 4th day, then we talked about the sun and the moon. God created the great light in the sky, the sun, and the moon. So what do these represent? Well, once you have this dry land appearing, what the sun represents, that brightness and that possibility, is that in every idea that you could possibly have, it comes with everything you need to accomplish it. Everything you need to accomplish it is inherent in the idea itself. I mean, imagine that. That's what the sun represents, the understanding that that is the truth. And I'll say it again, it's so apparent. The internet, like, who thought of that? Somebody thought of that, and they took steps, but there was this understanding. Or Thomas Edison and the light bulb, how long it took him to make that light burn. But he knew everything in that idea, everything was in that idea that he needed to make that happen. It already existed. It already existed. And the next great idea that you have, everything in it already exists to make it happen. And what the moon is a reflection of that. It's a reflection of that. The moon represents will. And it's not our personal ego will. This is the will of God. This is the willingness that we have to turn it over to that. And say, you know what? It's not going to be the way I think it's going to be. I'm going to be the conduit through which flows. The willingness to know that. Wow. If you start looking at your life this way, when you were in the flow, this is how your ideas worked. If you look back, I would ask you to do that. This is how it works. But then sometimes what happens? The next day, what day are we on? The fifth day. On the fifth day, the swarm happens. Because this is when you think, oh, you're all lined up, everything's good, you've been doing it, you got the faith thing going on, you're not taking your cues from out here. You know that that idea is infused with everything you need, and you're willing to turn it over to God, to turn it over to the divine. And then all this stuff happens and throws you into chaos, and you are like, what in the world? This is the step in creation where all the animals of the earth are created and all the fish of the sea are created. There's this big swarm of stuff, and that's what happens. You know what? The swarm is a part of the process. The swarm is a part of the process. There is innate intelligence in that swarm, by the way. When you think of those starlings that do that, or bats, or schools of fish. I forget what kind of fish do that. These huge things, like humans can't do that. Remember I said, one guy decides to stop and turn around and take a break, and bam, the whole thing crashes. But there's innate intelligence in the swarm, and there's innate intelligence when we swarm with conflict, maybe, with uncertainty. But the idea is to stand steadfast in that. One of my quotes this week is, stand steadfast in your uncertainty, because God is surely about to walk by. That's what's about to happen in there. It calls us to be able to discern what is the best thing, what is the right thing for me now. There's some discernment in there. So the swarm is okay. The swarm is okay. We need to be comfortable in the swarm, comfortable in the uncertainty, knowing that there's something greater going on. Something greater going on. So that's where we are. That's how we create, actually. Like I said, if you take a look back, that's how creation works. Creation that fills us and fulfills us. It's really not what Jesus used to say. What Jesus said was, it's not the things that I do, but it's the Father through me. This is what he was talking about. You don't get an idea on your own. There's no idea that we get on our own. It's from that divine intelligence outward. So what's left? What's left in these 7 steps? We're on day 6, and now we move into we're going into day 6 now. Did I say the last one was 6? You guys know there's 7 steps. 7 steps of creation, 7 days. We know that. Paula, there's a calendar. You should know that. So this is day 6. And God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air. And so God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. What? What does that mean? What is that about? What could that mean? What could that mean on this next step of uncovering and releasing our creative genius? Well, I think the scripture so beautifully captures something that in our spiritual journeys we tend to not spend much time on. Not spend much time on. And so this beautifully, I think, captures it. Because if we are as God is, which is what I think this is saying, it's like we're made in that image and likeness of God. If we are as God is, God being this magnificence, love itself, if we are made in that image and likeness, if we live and move and have our being in that, then I think what we spend little time doing is learning and being and loving ourselves. I don't think we love ourselves. Are you hearing me? I think we need to look in the mirror, square in the mirror, full length mirror, not a short mirror, full length mirror, and look at that hair that's out of place, and look at the eyes that are a little crooked, or one ear bigger than the other, or that crooked little smile that you have. Look at the sagging skin, the muffin top, and the 2 left feet. Just look at that. Look at that. Look at the sadness that you bring sometimes to life, the disappointment that you're carrying in yourself, the not so goodness that you're carrying. And you've got to look at all of that and say, I love that. I love that body, and I love that spirit that carries it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what we need to do. Do you love yourself? Do you love who you are? This expression of God itself? That's what I'm talking about. If you want to create this fullness of creative genius and you want it to flow through you, it's not going to flow through someone who feels that they're less than. It flows through someone who loves themselves, who knows that they are an expression of the divine. If that's what you want, you have to learn to love yourself. You have to look in that mirror and beyond that mirror and know that you are beyond that humanness. In that humanness, love yourself, and beyond it as well. That's what it's going to take. The creative genius isn't going to creep out around the pieces and parts that you don't like. If you want to unleash it, that's what has to happen. But I think for a lot of my life, maybe, and sometimes maybe for yours, or maybe all of it, is that we haven't loved ourselves. We haven't been able to look at ourselves and really accept that we are a unique expression of the divine, exactly like we are. You know, I think if God was a person, He would be looking at you right now saying, you are so beautiful. You are this expression, this uniqueness that I have never seen before, that came exactly from my womb, and you are just so perfectly beautiful. I think that's what He would say. I think she would walk right up to you, sit down with you, and give you the biggest hug and kiss and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm meeting you in this way. She would be so elated. I think that would be the case. Here's a poem that I think by St. Francis of Assisi that illustrates this. He said, I think God might be a little prejudiced. For once I asked him to join, he asked me to join him on a walk through the world. And as we gazed into every heart on this earth, and I noticed he lingered a bit longer before any face that was weeping, and before any eyes that were laughing. And sometimes when we passed a soul in worship, God too will kneel down. I have come to learn that God adores His creation. If God adores His creation, we've got to learn to adore it too. Because we are one with that. And there is no way that our creative genius is going to seep out through anything less than us loving ourselves. I'm exhausted after that. I feel like, whoo, it was running through me there for a minute. I didn't even know what it was. Which is a great segue, by the way, into the seventh day. Because you know what the seventh day is, right? Let me read that. So all the heavens and the earth were finished. And on the seventh day, God finished the work He had done. And He rested on the seventh day from all the work He had done. You know what? This always was very curious to me. So there's this magnificence, this omnipotence, this omnipresence, this just incredible, powerful love itself, and it's got to rest. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You know? Like, why would that have to rest? Well, here's the thing. It's not talking about God having to rest. Remember, we're not reading this scripture literally. What it's saying, I believe, is in the expression of our creative genius, we've got to learn to pause. We've got to learn to pause. We've got to learn that a critical part of expressing that creative genius is about meditating and praying and being still. The Sabbath is not about attending church. You know, it's not an obligation. Sabbath actually means rest. So if we were to express that and have that energy of creative genius move through us, we are wise to have periods of rest. And maybe many periods of rest throughout the day. Many of those pauses, we've talked about that here before, of having that pause, of allowing that to flow through me. You know, I started off this series with a story about the little boy standing on the hose. And he's telling his dad, well, the hose isn't working anymore. He said, well, take your foot off this hose and let the water flow. You know, we've got to pause even to realize that that's the condition of our foot on the hose. So, I have a favorite Bible verse that kind of encapsulates this. And I want to share it with you. It's from a interpretation of the Bible, the Message Bible. And it comes from John chapter 5, verse 30. And it goes like this. I can't do a solitary thing on my own. I listen, then decide. And you can trust my decision because I'm not out to get my own way, but only to carry out orders. To rest in that. I can't do a solitary thing on my own. How many times have I actually believed that in my life? Because I'm not a let it be kind of gal. I'm a get her done kind of gal. Maybe you are too. But I can't do a solitary thing on my own, not one thing. I can listen and decide. I can listen to that. I can pause in that moment. I can let that dry land appear from faith. I can be willing, I can understand that every bit of intelligence necessary to release that idea is in it. And I can be willing to turn it over. Stand in the swarm with confidence. And know that the answer and the manifestation of that is co-created by me, but through me, from God Himself. Well, that's the way it works. I think if you look at your life and look at some of the things you've created, you might realize some of those points in there. And more powerfully, you might today decide to live that way, to take that wisdom and to put it into practice actively in your life instead of as a byproduct of how it happened. You are an amazing and beautiful expression of the divine right this minute. Right now. There is nothing that's impossible to you. There is only the possibility of God through you manifesting the perfection that she already sees residing as you. So let's take a deep breath. And let's prepare for our meditation by breathing in and breathing out. Maybe at this time we simply let it be. We let all thought and thinking fall away. And we let it be. I see you opening those tightly closed fists, relaxing one forlorn finger at a time, releasing every single atom of fear held captive in your grasp. I see you reaching out and reaching into the miracle bowl, eating greedily of the fishes and the loaves until your belly is full, your whole being well fed. I see you drifting off to sleep, sleeping off the drunkenness of doubt, erasing the need to believe only what you behold with your eyes, ears, hands. I see you awakening to yourself, shedding layer after layer of ash, layer after layer of dust, casting away all but that which cannot perish. We were born inside the breath of God. We return to God inside our breath. Love is not given or taken, not made or found. Love is simply allowed. And so it is.